A lot of our groups are based on cognitive behavioural therapy, which is something that we can use to support people with anxiety and depression. The idea is that you might be struggling with quite a few different unhelpful thinking patterns and unhelpful behavioural habits. What we're interested in doing in CBT is we're interested in trying to essentially change those in a productive way that's going to make you feel better and reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety, reduce things like worrying, demotivation, and a big part of that is self-help techniques. So giving you a bit of a toolkit really that you can pull from and use in your day-to-day life to help support you with your mental health. The groups are fantastic for this specifically because the sessions are often longer than the one-to-one therapy, which means we can go in a little bit more detail than we otherwise would be able to. And I think that's good to recognise, because one of the misconceptions about group therapy is that people might feel like the content is a bit diluted. But it's actually the exact opposite. If anything, we can go into even more detail in groups, which I think is really, really good. The groups and courses are suitable for a lot of people, actually. And I think a big reason for that is because we offer so many different groups that are geared towards lots of different mental health difficulties. We offer groups and courses for depression, general anxiety, health anxiety, social anxiety, OCD, panic. We even have a group dedicated to preparing people for trauma therapy as well. So we have a very, very wide selection. It's a very wide net that we cast. But that's not to say that the groups, again, they're not diluted. The content and what we do within the groups is very, very specific, and it's all evidence-based and based on the actual treatments. If you're someone who's struggling with perhaps an aspect of substance abuse, that can be really tricky. And as a therapist, it's something that I recognise. But in situations like that, it's important that we get you the right support. Often that isn't the group setting, unfortunately, but there are definitely other ways we can look at supporting you through that. Again, we recognise that when you're struggling with depression, when you're struggling with anxiety, it's not uncommon to have the sorts of thoughts like, I don't want to be here anymore, I don't want to wake up anymore. Big difference between having these thoughts and then thinking, I'm going to do something, I'm going to act on them. And if you're someone who's having these thoughts, but you feel safe from them, you don't feel like there's any concern that you might act on them, then I definitely think that the groups could be a great option. But if you're someone who's actively concerned that you might harm yourself at some point in the near future, I don't think that the group option would be best, because we don't discuss these things in the group setting because it's sensitive, of course, isn't it? We want to protect your privacy. But in doing so, we might miss things that we really do need to discuss with you to ensure that we can help keep you safe. So in situations like that, the one-to-one support would be better, because we can monitor these things with you and support you in, I guess, more of a bespoke way that we perhaps wouldn't be able to do with the groups. Our courses are structured almost like a seminar. They're very psychoeducational. They're about giving you a toolkit that you can use to manage symptoms of anxiety, depression, stress, sleep problems, etc. Courses tend to have maybe up to about 20 people on them if it's remote, so via video. I think if it was face-to-face, we probably wouldn't go any more than, let's say, 12 people. These are structured in a way where the contributions are invited, but they're not mandatory. You don't have to contribute if you don't want to. The purpose of the courses really is to give you a self-management toolkit for anxiety and depression symptoms. It's largely structured around learning this stuff in the sessions and then going away and practicing it outside of the sessions and then bringing it back again the next session. And then if you want to, let us know how it went. We'd love to hear from you. Whereas the groups are more in line what I think most people would expect a group to be. Not in the sense that it's like an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. I think that's the misconception a lot of people have when they come into our service and they have their assessment and we present to them the idea of doing group therapy. It's nothing like an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. The groups themselves do require you to get involved and participate in them, and that's a big part of the treatment itself. It's actually practicing these skills and techniques, perhaps even in the session themselves, but under the guidance of the therapist, because the therapist is going to be there with you. And that's a really helpful element of them. All the content that we go through in the one-to-one therapy, we go through in the groups as well. So you're not missing out on anything. If anything, we have more time with them, so we can flesh them out a little bit more. But I think largely how they would differ from like a one-to-one therapy is that they're going to be in a group setting. There's going to be other people there with you who are also struggling with something very similar. One of the things that I really like about groups is that we can get you seen much sooner. And for some people, that can be the difference. And there's lots of different ways that we can actually go about doing group therapy. We do them in person, of course, and that can be our main clinic in Wakefield. We do also outsource other areas where we can do the sessions as well, like at the Samaritans, etc. We do also offer a lot of the groups remotely as well via video, and there's different ways in which you can access that. You could use a tablet, you could use your laptop, a computer, even your mobile phone as well, people often use. Group therapy and one-to-one therapy have some similarities and differences with each other. A lot of the content that you would cover in a one-to-one setting, just you and a therapist, is also covered in a group setting as well, whether that's, let's say, challenging negative thinking, techniques to manage worry, stuff like that. We go through them in a very similar way. But in groups, however, because the sessions are usually an hour and a half instead of half an hour or an hour, we have a lot more time to go through these things in a bit more detail than we otherwise would. And I think there's something inherently valuable about that. What we can sometimes use that time for as well is actually going through the technique in a way where we can get people in the group to participate so that they get some actual practice in under the direct supervision of the therapists. The skills and techniques that we go through in the groups aren't different to what you would go to in a one-to-one session with your therapist, and I really want to emphasize that. If it's thought challenging, whether it's worry management, whether it's some more behavioral techniques, a big part of therapy isn't actually the therapy, it's the leaving therapy, which can be quite daunting for people, whether it's group therapy or one-to-one therapy. One of the most integral aspects of group therapy is the booklet that accompanies it. Think of it like the cheat sheet to the booklet. It goes through all the techniques that we go through in the sessions, and it also gives you space to practice them as well, to manage symptoms of depression and anxiety. But at the end of the booklet, it also includes what we call the relapse prevention plan. There are a few different names for this. Some people call it the relapse plan, some people call it the therapy blueprint. But the idea is that by the end of therapy, you've made a lot of progress, you've learned some really good things, and you've made some really positive changes, which is wonderful. But how do we continue that progress after the sessions have finished, after you've walked out of that door for the last time? And a part of that is going to be completing your own relapse prevention plan. So let's say 6 weeks down the line, or 6 months down the line, I start to think, I'm slipping back a little bit. I feel like I may be going back to how I was when I came to Turning Point. Well, I know. When I finished my therapy, when I finished my group therapy, we went through a relapse prevention plan together, where I thought about what I would do if this was to ever happen. And I wrote some things down. And I wrote them down because they helped me before. So one of the really good things that the groups offer is that safety net for you to fall back on. So if your symptoms come back in 6 weeks' time or 6 months' time, you have that written plan there as a way of helping you keep yourself well after the group's finished. So the therapy doesn't just end when the group ends. We're essentially teaching you to be your own therapist afterwards. A big part of what keeps anxiety stuck for people is avoiding whatever triggers it. Large crowds of people, uncertainty, things that you're not used to. In one-to-one therapy, we're largely going to be looking at trying to change those unhelpful habits, because they're going to be keeping some of these thoughts stuck, they're going to be keeping the anxiety stuck. If you're someone who does have these who is a little bit apprehensive about the idea of doing a group or a course, have the conversation with your therapist first rather than shutting it out immediately as an option. When you're surrounded by people who are also noticeably struggling with depression, it can almost reverse that process. Like, I'm looking around the room and I'm also seeing people who are struggling in a way in which I thought nobody else did. I felt so alone. I felt like I was the only person that felt this way. Seeing everybody else also struggle in the same way as me, but it makes me feel like I'm less alone, and there's something comforting about that, because I feel like I fit in a little bit. I think I feel I'm more open to the idea of contributing as well. For people who are interested in our groups and courses, I'd like to invite you to refer to our service. You can do so by giving us a call, doing it online, or even through your GP. If you're someone who is looking for groups specifically, come have an assessment with us and we'll discuss some options with you. What I would say is that every treatment decision that we make is specifically tailored towards you. We want to offer you the support that's best for you, and could very well be that it's a group specifically. If you have a preference for groups over one-to-one therapy, that's absolutely something that we would take into account. We don't come into these assessments thinking, this is what we're going to offer you. We'll listen to you. Your preferences will be a big part of that decision of what your support looks like with us here at Turning Point.